Welcome back, everyone. Next, we have Touchstone Explorations, Inc., trades on the OTC Pink sheets under the symbol PBEGF, and on the TSX under the symbol TXP, and on the LSE under the symbol TXP. It's an innovative and dynamic company that engages in the complete exploration, development, and production lifecycle of oil and gas resources within onshore Trinidad. Please welcome its President and CEO, Paul Raymond Baay. Welcome to the conference today, Paul.
Thanks, Hannah. Really appreciate being here. And what I'd like to do is take about 20 minutes. I'll just run through our latest presentation. And then after that, we'll open it up to questions. So we'll start from there. And I know a lot of people maybe haven't seen this story before. And I think there's a couple of four key takeaways today. The first one would be that this is a company that's been an exploration company, and it's now moving into that next phase of production after having some great exploration success in 2019 and beyond. So, it's really a transition story from that point of view. We're located in Trinidad, which is, for those that don't know the geography great, is about 11 kilometers off the coast of Venezuela. And that is the biggest, most hydrocarbon-rich basin in the world. I know a lot of people think it tends to be the Middle East, but it is the richest basin in the world. So it kind of gives you an idea of where this story is situated. What you'll see is in the last couple of years, we've now put together a package of assets that makes us the largest onshore player in Trinidad. There's some huge offshore players, Shell, BP, EOG, those types. But we've carved out this niche onshore, and you'll see that in some of the maps and some of the things we talk about. And then the final thing, which has really been a catalyst and a game changer for us this past year, is in December, we announced that we're doing a transaction with Shell where we're buying their last remaining onshore asset from them. And what that does is allows us to get access into the liquid natural gas market. And if you're in our business, that's kind of the highest price gas, then we haven't been able to access that market. So when that deal closes, we'll be able to take that advantage of that. So that's kind of the four takeaways. So with that overarching, let me kind of walk you through the story a little bit. I'll quickly sort of summarize. We're at about 67 million barrels of oil equivalent in reserves. Market cap's about 100 million. Our independent engineering evaluation, usually after tax, comes in somewhere between 3 and 400 million USD. And you'll see the projects we have now are basically going to last the next 15 years. So it's a story that's at the beginning of the production phase as we go forward. So where we've been, just to give you a little context, the key thing for us and what we call oxygen in our business is really the land. And we've got a big land base. You can see the big land holding. But there was this big jump in 2024. And what we did is we negotiated 3 new big onshore contracts with the government of Trinidad, and they just closed towards the end of the year. So you see that big jump, which gives us our inventory for the next 5 years. You can see we've been drilling a number of wells in Trinidad over our life. That's going to ramp up. You'll start to see that chart will look very different in the next couple of years. You'll see 8, 10 wells drilled every year. So we're kind of getting to that next growth phase in what we see. So it's exciting for us for sure. Funds flow from operations. So this is cash after everything. This is after G&A, any financing costs, any costs that we have. And you can see it was running pretty modestly at about 3 million while we were putting the assets together. About 14 million last year, and you can see up to the end of September this year, it's about 13 million, again, all in USDs. We tend to focus a little bit on earnings, especially in the exploration cycle, and you can see in 2023, we wrote off some dry holes that we had, but then again, you can see that there's big profit as we go forward, and profitability is still a big part for us in what we see long-term being key. This is a little bit of a waterfall chart, kind of shows of the last 6 months, for instance, the last 12 months, we brought in about 65 million as our top line sales. And at the end of the day, after everything's paid, we have about 23 million in funds flow. So we're starting to get this cash flow machine going, and you'll really see that ramp up, especially with the new deal that we just did. To give you an idea, this waterfall is based on a gas price, which is about $2.50 per 1,000 cubic feet. And when I talk about the LNG market today, that's probably $8 or $9 per 1,000 cubic feet. So you can kind of see the magnitude of what would happen to this chart with higher gas price. Where we are now, this is our corporate production, and this is basically the different projects as they come on. And what you can really see as they come on, you kind of get these step changes. And each time we bring on a new little bit of production, it steps up. And you can see that target at the top there of 10,000. That's kind of where we want to be. And that's what we call 10,000 barrels of oil equivalent. although we're mainly gas now as we move forward. But you can start to see how these layer up. These are some technical charts, but what I really put them in here for is for people that are interested in sort of how these wells decline. But really what I want to put them in is once these wells start to flatten out, you end up with a 15-year life on these. So it's a very predictable, very low cost, and it just keeps generating cash throughout the next 15, 20 years as we go. So at the beginning of this cycle, what we need to do is build a bunch of gas plants. We did that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But these are the kind of properties in the wells that we're putting in after it. So again, we've changed from that exploration model to the production model that we see. This was our test case, and you see that it basically has generated about 2.9 million, and it's a fairly small little property. But after that, we moved to our main prospect, which is what we call Cascadura. And I think the real takeaway from this was really those two red boxes at the bottom. And what you can see is in the first year that we brought this facility on, so after we discovered the wells and got the gas plants and brought it on, the property generated 28.9 million US for the company. And up till that time, we had spent 26 million. So basically, we got all our money back in the first year. And then what you see now is you'll see this 15-year, what we call a tail of revenue. So that's the projects that we want to ramp up on top of this. So it gives you a pretty good idea of what we're looking at. And the market, for us is always a little bit tricky. Everybody gets really excited when you have these exploration discoveries, and then you got to build these gas plants and bring everything on. So there's always a little bit of a lag in news flow for a couple of years. And now we're coming out the back end of that, where we're starting to see the production come on and cash coming in, which is always exciting, especially for our CFO. So where we're going. And I think this really is, one of the key maps. This is the southern part of Trinidad. As I say, Venezuela sits just to the south of here. The main fairway, all the land you see on there, the red and the green are the acreage that we hold. Green is sort of our oil prospects, and red is the big blocks that we picked up from the government. And then the yellow piece you see in there is the acquisition that we announced back in December. And that acquisition went a little below the radar. We had to announce it on a sort of a Friday morning going into Christmas, and it maybe didn't get the attention that it should have. And we talked about closing that acquisition in the first half of this year, and I'll get to that a little bit more, but I'll show you the key difference in there. But what you can see now is we've got undeveloped acreage, huge working interest, and we operate everything you see on this map. So everything is in our control as we go forward. Just talk about this Shell acquisition and why it makes such a difference. It's called Central Block. It's the oldest gas field on the island, so onshore. We're picking up a 65% working interest, and the government owns the other 35%. But the key thing about this plant that's a little different than the other stuff that we operate is it takes the liquids out, so you get sort of these high, rich liquids that you get a high price for. But the other thing it does is when it comes out of that plant, it ties into both the LNG and what's called the domestic market, which is a petrochemical market. And what that'll allow us to do is move the gas around and get higher prices. And if you look at that Coho property up to the north, that's one of our existing fields. And that property right now is getting, as I say, about $2, $2.25 for its gas. And that Central Block is going to get, today would be getting around $8 if we were selling it to the LNG market. So there's some real optimization of what we can do in here. When we bought this, when we talked about buying it, we were hoping to close it in the first half of this year. And that is still on target. Hopefully we'll get it done before then. But right now, certainly everything is on time to do that. But the real opportunity here is Shell has done nothing on this property literally for the last 15 years. So what we're going to be able to do is drill some wells, do some recompletions, and then bring in some more gas to the facility. Again, going to that LNG market. And it's really a beautiful facility for anybody that's involved in our business. It's about as, when you can buy from a major, it really makes some sense. I should mention this acquisition will be done all through debt financing with the local bank in Trinidad, RBL. And it's a perfect add-on for us in what we do. So just talk a little bit about that marketing because it's kind of key for what we see. This is where we're at today. So we sell gas in that red line out of our Cascadura property up to a big petrochemical point called Point Leases. They do ammonia, methanol, steel. There's all types of things up there. I know people don't sort of think of that as when you think of a Caribbean island, but very, very industrial. And then in the middle is the green lines are all our oil goes to what used to be a refinery. Now it's just a big gathering station, but it allows us to sell all of that. And then down to that south in that red circle is the LNG facility, which right now we have no access to. And that's really where this becomes a big change. When you look at the next map, what happens is when we drop in that central block, it now allows us to take gas down to that LNG market. And it really opens it up for us. And I'm not sure that the capital markets fully understand what that's going to do for us when we get it done here in the next couple of months and start to operate under that and really focus on that. So, this map I think is critical to kind of talk about the strategy of why we're doing the transaction, but more of what it does now in Trinidad is we are the largest onshore player in Trinidad. We now control all of the gas processing facility in Trinidad. We got access to the domestic market. We've got access to the petrochemical market, and we now have access to the LNG market. So it's really exciting from that point of view in what we've got going on. The other things we have now are these gas plants that feed into it, and without getting into too much sort of detail on it, but we've now got 72,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day of capacity, and right now we're producing something that's very, very minimal on that. And so what's going to happen is we can now ramp up all of that. So where does that take us to? Strategy is pretty simple from here for us. It's a drill to fill model. And what we want to do is 3 phases of this. One is just drill our development wells going into these gas plants. We'll drill some exploration wells, and then we'll also make sure that we keep our oil properties going. So it's a pretty simple story. These are the bright dots on this map are the different opportunities that we have. Won't get into a lot of technical detail, but I think what you see here now with the land base we have, we really have a 5-year drilling program ahead of us. Facilities are built. That big 2-year time lag I talk about tying in, we don't have that anymore. Wells can be brought on in 60 to 90 days, some of them a little bit longer because it's a longer pipeline. But generally what we see now is we see these things happening, very quickly in what we do. But, it's definitely changed from being that exploration side to being a production side and a little more predictable, which is always nice. And then beyond that, one of the things that we do in our business is you have to be also looking at using technology. And one of the things that we have is 3D seismic technology. Normally, you would have to go out and acquire that on the ground. But fortunately for us, Shell and another company called Talisman had gone through here 10, 15 years ago and had gathered all this data. So what we're actually able to do now is take that data and reprocess it with new technology. And it's really showing us some fascinating things and adding to our inventory of prospects. And to give you an idea, that's only about $500,000 to do that. So it's not a big cost, but what it's done is it's increased our chances of success. It's identified a whole bunch of new opportunities for us. And, when you look at Trinidad and right where it is off that Venezuelan basin, the opportunities are just fantastic when you look at it. And with the outlets of the LNG plant and the petrochemical business, it's exciting. And then the other thing that we talk about for those that follow our business is what's called a Cretaceous play, and it's a structural formation. But the key thing is they've had these huge discoveries in Guyana, which is just one country sort of over on the coast. And when I say big, it's going to go from zero production to about 4 million barrels a day over the last 10 years. Exxon and a lot of the other players have really sort of rethought this play, and it's going to be making up 5% of the world's production in the next couple of years. So what we did is we took some of that technology that we're using in Guyana and took it onshore and started to look at some of the deeper opportunities that we see in Trinidad. And it's really exciting that, we've got 2 or 3 opportunities that pop out. So not only have we got this development drilling again, what we've now got is we've got this deeper exploration. And quite frankly, if any of these are successful, not only is it a game changer for us, but it'll be a game changer for the country, which is always exciting as well. And then on the social and governance side, I think one of the things that we have a little bit unique is that Trinidad's been in the oil and gas business for almost 100 years now. And what we find is their universities are all set up with engineering programs, geological programs. And so you've got this really highly educated force within Trinidad. And a lot of those individuals end up going to work for BP or Shell, go around the world, and then they want to come home. And what we're finding is the talent pool in Trinidad is really spectacular when you look at the opportunities that are there. And I think local knowledge is always helpful. So what's the takeaway here with a couple minutes left? We've got all this processing capacity now, and really all we need to do is drill to fill it. And I think the other key thing about that processing capacity is that it'll help the news flow now too. We don't have to have these big long waits for production to come on stream. We got over 200 identified drilling locations. Give you an idea. If we can drill 10 or 12 of those a year, so you're looking at a 20-year inventory. But more importantly, what it allows you to do is high grade that inventory, so you're always drilling the best prospects. The market, I didn't mention it, but right now, if all those plants I talked about, the LNG plant and the petrochemical plant, were running at full capacity, they would take what's about 4 billion cubic feet a day of gas. Right now, there's only 2.2, 2.3 billion cubic feet available on the island. So any gas that we discover can go to production, and it's 100% every day. We can sell those volumes into that market. We get paid in US dollars. So from that point of view, a lot of international deals, kind of one of their challenges is how do you get paid and how often you get paid. And we get paid on the 25th of the following month. And, you're getting paid by international companies. So it's pretty low risk. We've got a very large reserve base. One of the things we need to do now is convert that reserve base to production. And that's really that drill to fill model. We just need to drill. The trusted partners we've got, I think with the government and the industry, one of the advantages of Trinidad having Shell and BP and all the other big players there, all the services are there. We don't have to bring in a lot of services, although they might be a little different onshore and onshore, but they're there. We can access them. We have a fixed price gas contract right now that we operate under. And really what that does, especially for Scott and the finance team, is it allows us to predict right now the market as we go forward and how much money we have to spend. But that all changes when we enter that LNG market, because not only will we have the fixed price contract, but we'll now have this variable LNG contract that we have, which is obviously a much higher price. So that's probably going to be the real catalyst of change for Touchstone, is we'll enter into this LNG market that everybody is seeing around the world. We're going to continue to pursue creative acquisitions in Trinidad. Our focus is in Trinidad. I kind of joke that I'm an economist by trade, and I love the idea of competition. In our cases, in Trinidad, with everything that we've done, there really isn't much competition. So I kind of joke, I like competition, but not with us. And I think we've carved that out nicely in what we see. So it's really given us a competitive advantage in what we want to do. So in summary, we're at the next phase now. We've gone through that exploration phase, we've gone through that facility building phase, and now we're ramping up the production, and as well as still drilling some pretty exciting explorations. So on that note, maybe what I'll do, Anna, is I'll just turn it over and see if there's any questions out there.
Great job. We do have some questions for you. Some of them are pretty intense. I'm going to try to condense them as much as possible. Let's start with, after completing the drilling of Cast 4, when will you commence Cast 5?
Yeah, so that's obviously somebody that's following the development program pretty closely at Cascadura, but it's a good example of what we're talking about, where we want to drill these wells, back to back, so we can bring them on production. And that's been the plan, is basically the drilling rig walks from one location to the next. So the idea here is just to drill those back to back and then bring them on production. So we're drilling the first one right now. When it's done, we'll move to the second one. So that's the plan. However, the change now is that with the Shell deal and the gas prices being much higher on the Shell property, I think we'll likely move a bunch of capital down to the Shell property to get the higher price gas as we go forward.
Yeah, why don't you address that? There are quite a few questions about some of the operational challenges that you've faced recently. Maybe how are global oil and gas market fluctuations influencing you as well?
Yeah, the second one I can take pretty easy. Most of our production is the fixed price gas contract that we have now, so it has no impact on our pricing, which is, in some cases good, some cases it's bad. But I think at the early stage of growth, like we are now, having that fixed price contract allows us to really predict where we're going. So that's good. What we want to do is we want to have a portfolio. We'd really like to have some fixed contracts. We'd like to have some LNG contracts and some variable contracts. As we get bigger, we'll see that happen. The question around production or around some of the challenges, those were those decline curves that I showed, and you could see those declines came off very steeply. And as we've said to the market before, they came off steeper than we thought. Always a risk in exploration flow. You don't know what you have until you put them on production. But what we are starting to see is seeing those really flatten out when they find kind of a sweet spot. And that's what we're now finding. So what it means is you probably have to drill a few more wells at Cascadura, for an example, to get the same reserves out of the ground. And we're figuring that out. But you can see the cash on cash, right? I mean, that thing generated $30 million in its first year. And, our wells are $5 to $6 million. So, the cash on cash and the rate of return is really high for sure.
Thank you for that. Matt wants you to provide some insight as to the performance of using MPD on the Cascadura 4 development well that's currently being drilled, and in which area do you see this technology having the most benefit?
Yeah, with it on the Cas 4 well, we're just getting to the point where we're going to use it. So, Matt, great question. I don't know yet. Like it's brand new, so we'll get back after, and I'd like to use it on a couple of wells before we really decide to do it. But having said that, everything in Trinidad is overpressure just because of the tectonic plates and everything. It's going to be used everywhere. It will be used everywhere. The idea of it is as you're drilling, you don't want to damage the rock. And what it allows you to do is make sure that you're not damaging the rock as you're drilling. You can increase and decrease pressure. And as I say, let us get through Cas 4, Cas 5, and the other things before we look at it, because this is the first well it's been on. So that's a long-winded way to say, Anna, it's too early to tell.
Okay. Steve states it's been nearly 2 months since you announced Central Block purchase. So when do you expect the financing to be completed? Just a few questions. The significance of the TXP. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think I've talked about I've talked about the Central Block and the importance of it, right? I mean, it really makes us a different player in Trinidad. It gets us into that LNG market, kind of gets us out from being captive to the national gas company fixed price contracts. And, with regards to the financing and the closing and all of that, our strategy on this is we'll just make one announcement when we've got all the approvals. There's certain government approvals, partner approvals, financing, everything. We'll just make one announcement when it's all done so that people know when it's done and when we've got it completed. We told everybody we were going to get it done in the first half of the year, and I can tell you that's going to happen. So, if we can do it sooner than that, we certainly would like to.
All right. Some insider terms here. Will you require NGC's approval or acceptance to sell Coho gas via the CV to the LNG facility?
Boy, there's some people I need to have in my management room on some of this stuff, but yes, we would, and we're in discussions with them on that. And I think that, again, that gets back to this whole discussion of, and I really am excited that people are asking these questions, because I think the market may be starting to understand the significance of this acquisition, how we can move volumes around from other properties in here to take advantage of the higher prices. So I'm happy with that question. I think it's very insightful.
Question about any issues with the rig drilling at Cask B. Why hasn't there been a recent production update?
Yeah, production updates. We don't do them monthly. We just do them when we do the announcements for our quarterly. So that's when we'll do that. And as I've said to everybody, if there was something that was going sideways or good or better than what we've got forecast, we'd be obligated to release it. So just people seem to want information all the time, and our view is we need to grow up a little bit as a production company. We put out a forecast. If that forecast is going to change, then we'll let everybody know. But that's not the case as of today.
December 2024 guidance. What are the key production targets and capital expenditure plans for 2025?
Yeah, so we put out forecast about 7,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day, and that's a combination of the new drilling this year and then the production that we brought on last year, and then the funds flow numbers that we had put out there, roughly around 17 million. Now that is all before the Shell stuff. So what everybody will see, what the capital markets will see, is they'll receive revised guidance on all of this when we close the Shell transaction. But we'll do that when we close it, and we've got the keys. Part of dealing with a larger multinational is they're a little more restrictive on what you can say about certain things. And so I think that we'll be able to provide a lot more detail once this deal closes when we get that done.
And upon reaching total depth, does Touchstone plan to immediately commence drilling ST5, or will efforts focus on testing and integrating ST4 into production if it's deemed commercial?
No, the plan would be to, we want to tie in 2 wells at a time, so we'd really like to go to 5 and do that. The only thing that would change that, quite frankly, is if we were to have lightning speed on getting the Shell deal done, we may decide it makes more sense to go down and drill a well at Central Block where you're getting 4 times the price for your gas. So stay tuned on that. That would be the only thing that would change that.
And can you talk about any time frame once access to the new LNG pricing for TXP?
Yeah, so really the day we get the Shell facility, we start getting access to the LNG plant. But there's sort of 2 contracts. There's a what I'll call a juicy can contract, and then a supercharged contract, and we have to get over a certain volume. And so that's why as soon as we get that facility, what we're going to do is really a 3-phase plan on it. Number 1, we're going to look at the existing wells. We think there's some ways to optimize them through reperfing, which we've done before at Cascadura. Second thing would be to drill some more wells. And then the third thing would be to bring additional gas, like a follow-up well at Coho or into the plant. Because the idea is to get that Shell facility as full as we can get it, as fast as we can get it. And that's going to be the focus for us in the remainder of 2025.
And you might have touched on this, but someone's asking, you mentioned Touchstone is producing between 50 and 60 million cubic feet per day. Does this production figure encompass output from both Cass A and Cass B, or is it exclusive to Cass A?
So that 60 million, I think, came from an article interview that I did in The Guardian when I was down in Trinidad last week. And that was our initial production out of Cass. We're not, everybody saw from those graphs that we're not at those volumes. We haven't published our latest production, so I'm not going to get the box of talking about that. But when you look back at the last production numbers, those are good ones to look at that we published.
And you can close with this question. How do you plan to balance exploration activities with production growth in the upcoming year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think in 2025, it's going to be mostly development, just because the opportunities we've got both at Cascadura and Shell, and let's face it, cash is king, so we'll focus on those. But following that in 2026, what we'd really like to do is take about 80% of our capital on development projects, and 20% would be on exploration. And so in 2026, what you see is 2 or 3 wells, including maybe a Cretaceous well in early 2026 that we would do. So that would be the balance as we go forward. Right now, the problem is we are opportunity rich in development, just because we've been kind of sitting on the sidelines building these plants. So the first focus is going to be to drill up all those development prospects that we have, which is a good problem to have.
Another quick question. When do you expect to renegotiate your fixed price contracts? And if the pricing is not ideal, can you move it through the central block to gain the higher prices?
Yeah, this is a pretty confidential discussion that we're having, but we've talked about that. I mean, I think the pricing isn't necessarily reflecting the market, so we're having that discussion with NGC. The nice thing that we have now is we have the ability to move some of our capital to central block and drill in central block. We didn't have that before 2 months ago. We didn't have that ability to move that capital around. So it's going to be allow us to do that. But, I think it'd be really nice if we could renegotiate it. But with all the forecasts I've given you, they're based on the old pricing. So anything that we can do to improve that would just be on top of that. So we need to do that. But I'm not going to do that in public. That's something we need to do private with NGC.
Wonderful. Paul, do you have any closing remarks for our viewers today?
No, it sounds like a few of our shareholders are paying close attention, which is great. I think that's the excitement. I think what I'm really encouraged about today is a lot of these questions are around central block and the opportunities that we potentially have there. And it may be starting to set in the significance of that potential acquisition for us. So we'll get it closed as fast as we can, and we'll move forward from there. So really appreciate the time today.
Wonderful. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Alan.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.